Hello and welcome to GeekVerse Sidequest, your weekly stop for video game news, reviews, retrospectives, and more here on the GeekVerse Podcast Network. I'm your host, the talking head, Dylan Muss, and I have two guests with me today. Not too many times that's happened on Sidequest, but we got another one here for you. The world's serpent's base. I got it. Dante Denaklet. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, dude. I'm excited to talk about God of War, especially on the heels of the new one, man. This has been one of my favorites over the last decade or so.
Yeah, I feel like, you've been on SideQuest a lot this year, and in a lot of these indie games and stuff you're not necessarily loving, so I feel like it'd be fun for you to actually have something you're very passionate and loving to kind of gush about. For
we could have talked about Vampire Survivors. I would have waxed poetic about that all day, man.
It's never too late. Is that 1.0 yet, or is it still
it has to be like right around the corner. Okay. I think they released it. I'm tangent already.
Gotta love it. And then we have the Giles of the Crescent Moon, Sarris, back for your second proper podcast episode. I'm sure you'll be joining for the 24-hour stream coming up here, but good to have you back on the podcast itself. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good, thank you. Good to be back. I don't get to play very many games these days, so I'm excited to be able to talk about one that I have played and get to join in on the conversation.
Yeah, of course, you were here for the first Elden Ring review. Dante was here for the second one. Nice. So where are you at with Elden Ring right now? Because I know that is one where it's like, okay, I don't have much time for games, so Elden Ring will take you 2 years to beat. But where are you at right now? Spoilers, whatever. Where are you at?
I just beat it last week, I think, for the first time.
Yeah, crazy.
Congrats, dude.
About 150 hours.
Damn, beautiful.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, I can't wait to talk to you more about that. That'll be exciting. But yeah, today we're all in on God of War. Of course, God of War 2018. I guess there's technically two games that have this name now, so you always got to make that distinction. But on the heels of God of War Ragnarok coming out, I believe it's November 9th, we are here to do the retrospective. With, I think, Dante, played this game at launch. Sarah's played it in the last year, and then I just played it for the first time in the last month here. So kind of different levels of, I guess, dedication to this series. So just a couple plugs to get out of the way. First of all, a lot of reviews going on. Last week we did A Plague Tale Requiem, which was a lot of fun to review that. And Gotham Knights is coming out as well. So that's going to be Travis and Taylor reviewing that one. I'm excited to hear what they think. Make sure to check out our Patreon where you can get episodes early and ad-free, such as this episode, which will be probably 5-6 days early up on Patreon for the people over there. So check that out. Our Discord's always a good place to hang out. I got a question from one of our Discord fans in there for the episode today, so that's a good place to get that stuff in. And as usual, thank you to Taylor for making the thumbnails and Amanda for doing the music for the show. But with that, I want to get right into it. So God of War 2018. I first want to just go a little bit before that. I want to know your guys' history with the other God of War games, because I have not played a single one. I didn't have the PlayStation consoles growing up, never had a Vita or anything like that. So I just never played any of these games. A newer PlayStation fan. And even with this one, obviously, I didn't play it at launch. It took me a few years, but I'm finally in there for the first time. But I guess we'll throw it over to Dante first. Have you played any prior God of Wars, and where would you put your fandom with the series?
Yeah, I've played all of them, even the side PSP ones. I really love that series. I'm a big fan of character action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. I'm really jazzed for Bayonetta, even though there's a little bit of rocky
controversy there.
Yeah, there's some controversy there for sure. But just a really big fan of the genre. So God of War 1, 2, and 3, I think are stellar. And honestly hold up pretty well despite their just egregious amounts of gore and just being this hyper masculine thing, which I don't think has as much play these days. Which is okay. I agree. I think maybe those things don't age super well, but the gameplay definitely does. I think this new arc of God of War, if you do have some familiarity with that stuff, has just an even more impressive character arc for Kratos. It's dude's been through a lot. You kind of understand why he's a pretty shit dad because of all the stuff he's dealt with prior.
For sure.
So really, really big fan of the series as a whole. There's been a few that have been a little mid, but the main three are excellent games.
Gotcha. How about you, Sarris? I don't know if we've ever really talked about this, but have you played any of those older games in the series?
Yeah, I've played. I mean, I grew up on PS2 essentially, so I think the second one was for PS2, so I must have played that one. But I never had a PS3 growing up. I kind of just seen it and heard about God of War. It was always an exclusive, right? I had an
Mm-hmm.
Xbox and that was coming out, so I never got to play it. But I've always been really fascinated with Greek mythology,
Ooh.
just in general. So I always was kind of gravitated towards this game, but being a kind of a squeamish child, I didn't really like the gore and stuff. So it was kind of off-putting to me. Um, so I didn't get into it too much. I just remember really liking like the action sequences and the button pressing sequences of those games.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like a huge fan of the series, but when I got this one, 2018,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is like a step above from what I remember the other ones being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious actually, Dante, you mentioned that the first game's kind of being like that kind of character action game, which this is not really anymore. I wouldn't describe it. You wouldn't describe it that way either, would you? This new version of it?
Not the traditional version, right? Like I think this definitely leans more into like gets more like an action RPG almost,
Right.
with like some like Souls like mechanics
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the combat, whereas the previous ones are definitely more in that like combo based mashing buttons sort of thing. But like this
Yeah.
game sort of has some of that even too, though. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's occasions where you'll like switch stances if you just like pause on a button for a second,
Right.
or there's like definitely combos between your like lights and heavies. So I just feel like it maybe is just like an evolution of that, with adding more, like I said, of those RPG elements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put it in a box.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I guess I want to put this out early that spoiler warning for this episode. I don't want us to hold back at all. I think this game's been out long enough, even though it's only a few years, and it's just such a popular, critically acclaimed game that I feel like if you have wanted to play it, you would have played it by now. So yeah, I don't want us to hold back at all. Just feel free to say whatever you want from this point forward, putting that out there. But throwing it right back to you, Dante, in a just kind of overall sense, because of course we'll get into the nitty gritty of the gameplay, the combat, the story, all that stuff. But you played this game at launch, and yeah, it holds up for you like those original ones do. So what do you think it is about this game that has grabbed you so much?
Oh man, this one is actually like I'd say if we look forward like 10 years, this will hold up better than any God of War. It definitely it has some really, really impressive feats behind it. Like some of the best storytelling I've experienced in video games. I think it's really personal, and the acting is exceptional across the board. There's not one bad voice acting role in the entire game. It's all like 10 out of 10s across the board. The direction is incredibly impressive. Like it definitely, I think this game does a great job of when you look at the medium like game, there's only a few games that I think have like had just peak cinematography. It's like this and like a lot of the Naughty Dog games, and say like removing the gameplay from it at all, just like visual direction I think is gorgeous. And then just like the character development in this game too, I think is just really, really impressive. I can do this for a while. I was going to say I'm thinking of like a dozen things where I'm just gonna just once again like wax poetic about it. But and then from a gameplay standpoint, I do think it has pushed that kind of like character action game forward, or that genre forward a little bit by offering this kind of mix between in a time when there was like everybody was copying a Souls game, still doing that, but feeling like it's staying true to the roots of God of War. Like it never felt like I was playing something that was like totally different. You're still punching crates open. You're still like once again doing combos. So it wasn't this just kind of like I don't know, you don't necessarily R1 mash, but like it felt like there's a lot more like speed and creativity in the combat, in a way that a lot of those character action games have as well, despite being slightly slower and more focused on that kind of like every enemy is a threat instead of dealing with like 30 guys on the screen at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, I'll go forever. I'll go forever. I really like.
That
I fucking love this game, dude.
that makes it so much more interesting for me, though. Like just having that more intelligent gameplay of having to like gauge your threat levels.
Oh yeah,
because they all everything can kill you, so you have to like know how to dispose of certain enemies quicker than others, how to do it, when to target them. Like that's way better for me than just spinning around and killing 30 people at once.
yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Like the original games, every once in a while, like a larger enemy would come on, or like maybe like a Medusa would come on the screen. You're like, oh god, that guy's gonna freeze me. It'll CC me, and then I have to I'll get my ass beat by the 30 smaller guys around me. I need to deal with these. But like, and this game has character or enemies like that too. But like even the regular, I'm gonna blank on the names of them, but like the regular enemies are a problem. And you get like 2 or 3 of those around you, and you're not necessarily like managing your skills.
I'm gonna stop you there. Just like we'll come back to come back to the combat, right. But throwing over to you, Sarris. You played some of the series, but maybe didn't have that big moment with it. You jumped into this, and I think you love it as well. So what is it that does it for you?
Yeah, well, I was actually looking at my game file this week. And it's been longer than I started in 2019, which was way longer than I thought it had been. But like I still remember, so it's been a while. But what I do remember about the first gameplay was like just being blown away by the cutscenes and just the animation of it. Obviously, the voice acting is phenomenal, but just like I don't know, just the fluidity of the animation was insane. Like when you're going down the river or whatever, and then it opens up to Midgard and you see the world serpent for the first time. It's like, holy shit, like this looks amazing. And it feels like you're really like engrossed in this world. So that was probably the biggest thing that I liked. Obviously I really like the gameplay, as I touched on before, it's very fluid. But yeah, just the, I don't know, the coming together of it all was very, very well done.
Love it. Well, I'm glad I have you guys here because I am swooping in on this one much, much lower. I truthfully did not really enjoy my time with the game as a whole, which I know is, not a popular opinion. It's funny, Dante, you said that you feel like this game, in 10 years, whatever, will hold up better than other God of War games. And for me, I'm already at a point where I'm like, man, I feel like even before I played this game, I'm like, I never want to climb another yellow ledge in my life. I'm so sick of that game design. Oh, yeah. And you got to climb a million yellow ledges in this game. Just a lot of... I think that was really, when I boil it down to one thing, it would be that I just think the level design like really sucks in this game, and we can get into the details of why that is. But I mean, I can't lie. Like the story is great. The characters are all fantastic. The performances, the minor characters, I enjoy all of them. Like they're just fun to have along for the ride, whether they're in it a little bit or a lot. And that's what kept me going for sure. And that's why I still want to play the sequel. Is hopefully the gameplay stuff gets better as well. But I just want to see where these characters are going. And that's with having absolutely no history with the series and not really doing any research. I don't really know what the story is of those older games. And yeah, when it comes down to the combat side of things, I liked it. That's not all negative for me. I think it was, if there was like half as much combat in this game as there is, I think I would have been perfect with it, but I just got so burnt out on it over time. And once again, I got reasons for all this stuff, so hopefully I can at least back it up and you guys can see where I'm coming from.
This man is going to need to explain.
I will for sure. But I mean, on the surface level, like when you, like using the Leviathan axe for the first few hours, like that's a great multi-tool, weapon puzzle solving thing. Like I really like that, but I just kind of got burnt out on it. And then they give you another weapon later in the game, and that kind of refreshed it. But then after another 2 or 3 hours, I was like, okay, I don't really care about the combat of this game. I'm playing through the rest of this to see those cinematic moments that you were mentioning, Sarris, because this game definitely has some of that. You also mentioned just the cinematography, even just the way the camera kind of like bobs, and it kind of has not shaky cam, but it feels like there's someone actually there holding
a camera. Yeah,
like that kind of thing. That all works for me. And there's some stuff about this game that are fantastic for sure. But overall, it was a grind for me to play. Truthfully, like just the minute to minute stuff did not work for me at all. So I wouldn't say I'm excited for the sequel, but I will still be. I feel an obligation to play it because of the podcast and stuff. But if it weren't for that, I don't think I would I don't think I would have finished the game truthfully, and I don't think I would be jumping into a sequel. But I am excited to break that down.
Opposite ends of the spectrum. I think God of War, outside of like Elden Ring, is like was my most anticipated game of this year. Like,
no, I mean, I truthfully have not heard many people like this game. I've heard so many people say this is their favorite game of all time. Even Superbad.
It's in my top 5.
A question from that we'll bring up later said this is his favorite game of all time, and I'm like, I get it partially, but at the same time, that's like wild to me because of just how boring some of the sequences are.
Oh no, okay, the hyperbole.
Hey man, you know, different strokes for different folks. It's interesting because I just talked about how we reviewed Plague Tale, and that is a very similar game in terms of gameplay and how contrived like the level design is and stuff like that, and even has a very similar story. And I love those games. Like Plague Tale's like I really enjoy that experience, but there's just something about this that does not work for me. So let's get into it. I think we should kind of start with the combat. I think that is a good place to start. We can come back to the story stuff, characters later. Does that sound like a good place to go for you guys?
Yeah.
So, I mean, right off the hop, but just to go more in depth on what I was talking about with the Leviathan axe, like that is just a fantastic weapon. I think it's a testament that this game, like for so many people, is so successful when you only have, I guess, you know, technically you have a shield, you have fists, but like really you have kind of 2 weapons in this, and obviously you're upgrading them, getting new moves and stuff. But the fact that you have like such few weapon types and it can stay fresh is pretty impressive. And I just love the Leviathan axe, like throwing it around, when you catch it and then like bring that into a strike right away. And then just having that be the thing that you're solving most puzzles with in the game and doing traversal, I think is great. I love that. In any game, when you make your lead weapon also have all these other functions. So testament to that part of the combat for sure.
Yeah, I think the Leviathan axe is such a like just impressive game design thing that you can just like chuck this off into the distance, be punching your way through a group of baddies and be like, fuck, I want my axe. And then realize you threw it away ages ago and it's going to take like 10 seconds to get back to you because it's coming back from the area you threw it at. I think it's just the most like hilarious situation. Obviously all of the puzzle mechanics that you do with that axe are super fun too. Like anytime that you have to kind of move something and if you let go it moves back, but you can use it to freeze, I think is just like, I don't know, like really they definitely brought up some fun ideas. I will say there's more. I'd at least say there's 4 weapons, right? Like there's the Leviathan axe, there's just punching, which feels incredible. There's so much like weight behind Kratos's hits, like it's just doom 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 anytime he's punching. It's like it's excellent. And then there's the chains of war. I forget what they're called. I don't have them yet.
The Blades of Chaos, I think.
Blades of Chaos. Man, I cannot believe I'm fumbling those. I'm in the middle of a New Game Plus right now, so I was hoping I would be able to beat it by then, but that game's longer than I remembered. But then there's Atreus, right, who has this like contextual button, right? So he has square just like mapped to him, so you can do ranged attacks that do stun damage as you go through the game. Obviously he gets a selection between which kinds of arrows he has that have different effects. One is electric and one is like this like light arrow, and I find those to be like, especially in the harder difficulties, really important to utilize because there's enemies that are just problematic. There's these like wraith style enemies that anytime they come in, you have to make sure that Atreus hits them with an arrow and stuns them before you go in, or else they're just going to run away constantly from Kratos. I think they do a good job of like introducing enemy types that force you to use certain weapons. There's like these ice enemies that like just don't care about the axe at all, and you either get to switch to the Blades of Chaos or switch to your fists. And then there's also like this combo mechanic that I think is like just works really well. Like you can just kind of like R1 your way through that game, but they give you this skill tree, which is a pretty traditional throwaway skill tree, but if you dig into some of those skills, you end up being kind of a menace. Also 10 out of 10 parry in that game. Love a good parry.
Why is it a 10 out of 10 parry for you?
Projectile parries, like hitting stuff back. The timing is super like it's not as tight as a Dark Souls, like, or a FromSoft game. Like those parries feel really satisfying because they are so difficult. But this is actually like a tool you can use all of the time. Like I think they do a really good job of pointing out when enemies are kind of attacking you from off screen, and the fact that the parry can just work. You don't have to turn around and look at them. Works really well too. But like, just the fact that it is such a good tool during those fights. Like there's situations where you can just sit there and block and you'll take like chip damage, and it can be a situation that really pushes you into a bad situation. If you parry in those moments, it actually like gets the guys off of you as well, and you can kind of then switch to your axe and throw an axe at them, or you can hit them with the Atreus. I think it just gives you really good options afterwards. It feels like almost like a fighting game where you do like I don't know, like a really good reaction, and it opens up a new opportunity. Like you're like, okay, like I've shift the momentum in my favor because I did a parry. Whereas some games it's just like, all right, I just wanted to stump on you, so I parried. This is a little bit of both.
Well, more to that point, like I forget what it's actually called in this game, but the stun mechanic, the stagger bar or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, actually having different tools build it up faster, especially for the harder enemies later on, like that becomes essential to be able to juggle them and to be able to parry them and dodge when you, like it has that dodge indicator for stuff that you can't actually parry. And that just adds to like just the tools in your toolbox to be able to deal with things effectively. Also, yeah, like using Atreus in all those effective ways and using your special abilities and then switching to your other, like the Chains of Chaos special abilities while those other ones refresh. Like that's all. I think they did a very good job with utilizing the different things that you can do with the limited tools that you have. That's what I really enjoyed about the gameplay.
Yeah, I think the Blades of Chaos like come at a great time, not just from like the story perspective of like, okay, I need something to power me up here and like make the journey back to go get them. That's like a good moment for the character. But I think for me to feel obviously more powerful in the sense that I can actually like finally hit a lot more enemies at a wider range, like that power up felt great. And I think that did like rejuvenate a lot of my interest in the combat, as I mentioned, for at least a few hours as I, was a bit more intrigued there, and you have more things to unlock. We'll talk about that progression system a bit, but yeah, I do like that you can quickly switch to your fists, and your shield has a few attacks as well, which is fun. And you mentioned Atreus's bow, which yeah, you're right, like that's not something that you are actively hitting a button to control it, so you might as well be shooting it. You're just not the one holding it. But I found that was the thing that, like in the skill tree, I was prioritizing because I just felt like it was so great to have just overpowered arrows that just stunned every enemy, and I could just spam. And if I felt like it, I could sit in the back and just throw my axe and like have the arrows flying off and not having to interact with the enemies. So I think that was a good addition. Plus, like the summoning the different wolves, or
when you hold down square, he has like either wolves or birds come and fly out and like do different types of attacks.
Yeah, I always love a good summon, so those are fun to use, even if they're pretty quick uses.
Yeah,
like they're not sticking around
reload
and tanky for you, but I like them. I think they're good.
Yeah, they actually, I feel like they've saved my ass quite a few times in this game. I'm playing on I tried to play on Give Me God of War on New Game Plus, and it's impossible.
That's the highest difficulty.
It's so hard. It's so hard. Like I really felt like I got to like the third group of enemies, and I was just like, this is just not possible. You have to be on, like, you can't mess up. But in the higher difficulties, that like special move that Atreus can do, it ends up being absolutely necessary to just make sure you're doing enough damage as well.
Right. So I think maybe where one of my issues, or where I just kind of got burnt out on the combat, was the lack of enemy variety in the game. There's a lot of the humanoids that feel like slightly different, but not really, and that's like what you're fighting most of the time. And then they have the ogres and the trolls. I forget which one's which, but the bigger enemy that has like the totem pole thing that they're swinging around. They changed the look on them, and maybe they have a couple new moves here or there, but I just found like, man, do I really gotta do this boss fight this many times in this game? And I think that's like there wasn't really much else other. I guess like the Dark Elves changed things up. There's the Valkyries, but I didn't really fight those a whole lot. And then
those are such fun fights.
Yeah, those are great.
And then there's I don't know, like there just wasn't a ton of like memorable boss fights. I guess we can talk into some of those specific ones, but I think is that something you guys would see as an issue, or are you like pretty happy with the amount of variety that's there?
I think there's a few more. They definitely sprinkle stuff in throughout. Like you go to Muselheim or Muselheim or something like that. They have a couple different enemy types, but then there's also the big rock ogre guys. There's the wolves. There's the werewolves. They balance it out. It's one of those situations where
maybe it's a case of not using the enemies that they had access to, because you're right that they do have these different types. But I feel like some of those I like barely saw at all, and it's fun if you can mix up, which ones you're fighting in a certain battle. But I feel like 90% of the time they just fall back on those same ones over and over again.
I agree. There's definitely they definitely utilize that like humanoid enemy often, and I think it comes down to I wish there was more variety within the humanoid enemies, because like from a lore perspective, I don't think I want tons of different things. It just starts to get a little bit like, all right, you have to explain why these things are here now. And there's the like wraith enemies. There's like it's decent. It's not like this amazing array of enemy types, but I think considering how like tight the experience is and like how small the area ultimately is, I wouldn't expect it to be this like hugely diverse group. And while there are, I guess, not necessarily a lot, I think they do mix these enemies up in a way. Like they'll put like arenas together where there's certain groups that make those challenges or those fights still interesting. It's like, okay, I have to deal with all of these guys and then one of these now, which changes up the situation a little bit. But I agree, there definitely is room for more, but I think they have to be a little careful about how they implement that stuff, because there is so much lore in this game already. They just have to start cramming more in.
Fair enough.
I think they utilize the different enemy types fairly well, like if you're looking at the game as a whole, like with all the optional areas and whatnot. But as far as like the main storyline, like it's kind of, I think I did find myself being like, okay, another one of these guys again.
Especially when it's like that same kind of KO cutscene where he like, picks up the whatever it is, the pole, and like smash it into him. God, I've seen you do this like 10 times, Kratos. I'm not too intrigued by this anymore.
I tell you, those finisher animations, there definitely needed to be more variety in those. Like the troll, they kills the troll the same way every time. Like when you're talking about the dark elves, like I don't know how many spears I threw through these damn guys, but like and they just like fly off into the distance. But I swear there was a time where I did that like 6 times in a row. But you mentioned bosses, and I do think there's some like amazing boss fights in this game. There's quite a few that are like, I think the cinematography does more for it than the fights themselves, or just the.
Well, one thing that I'll point out from my own experience is like as soon as I was done the story, I was out, so I know that the Valkyrie things are what people are into. But since I didn't really care much for the combat, I'm like, I don't really want to do that. So if those are like some of the better boss content, then yes, I did like not engage with that at all. But I think for me, it's like I the first Baldur fight, of course, that's a great moment. That's a lot of fun. But this like when I fought him again and actually killed him, it was like, I don't know, this is kind of boring. Or for me, like the big disappointment I think was the dragon boss fight that you do.
I think that's a fun fight.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think we just very much enjoy this game for different reasons, because like that was just a slog for me. I'm like, I cannot wait for this to be over. I am not engaged at all in the design of this boss fight. But what are some of your guys' favorite boss fights in there?
You go, Dante. I gotta remember.
All right, no worries. Yeah. So you mentioned the first Baldur fight. I think that is like it sets such a good tone for the game in general, like and just these multiple moments where you like it does a really good job of showing you what you have to do, especially or tutorializing how you have to handle some of these like enemies that will kind of, if you're not blocking, you're not parrying in that fight on the harder difficulties, you're not getting through it. I think it's a really good kind of like opportunity to push you to use some of your tools. And then just the constant like berating you're getting from Baldur throughout is like incredible. And he's just like, when you get to the like end of that fight, and he's just like, I didn't feel any of this. It's just like, I don't know. I cracked up at that. At just the setting this guy up as just being this like absolute menace. I actually really like the dragon fight. I think it does a good job of tutorializing a item that you're going to use throughout the game. So you have these like tree trunks scattered throughout the space, and they have this kind of like glowing red orbs that have like this electricity, and you have to wait for the dragon to start to shoot his electricity out, and it like sparks the orbs. And you do that a few times. You're fighting, like hitting his like claws and stuff like that throughout. I just think it's like this really just big epic fight. I think most of the fights in this game, I'd say they're outside of the Valkyrie fights, which are just really mechanically strong. I think they're better for the visual like scenario they put you in, like the fact that the Baldur fight is broken up by like 4 or 5 different moments, and there's these like small cutscenes in the middle, and in these cutscenes you're still like R1 spamming and punching the hell out of the guy, or in the like, once again, the dragon fight is just, it's like kind of like epic arena, and it's just this like huge enemy, and the largest enemy you've seen up until that point. I do think there's some like some boss fights that are just kind of like, all right, this is a buffed version of a regular enemy, and those ones can be a little mid. I'm thinking like when you first enter Alfheim and you're leaving Alfheim, and you got to fight this like the like daddy elf.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's just like that one's just like, all right, like you have all your resources. There's going to be health items throughout. Like, just like do your best. Use what you have. There's not really anything special to those, but some of the more story-driven boss fights, I think, are just like cinematically impressive to me, more than they necessarily are from a gameplay standpoint. But I think the cinematics like take it over the top.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Like that fight with I forget the giant's name, but it's one of the last boss fights when you're fighting the main enemy.
Baldur.
Baldur. And Freya is just controlling the corpse of the giant. Like I thought that was extremely well done. Just to put you in this kind of atmospheric, like you kind of feel invincible being Kratos, but at the same time you're like, what the fuck am I in right now? Like, what kind of situation is this? As far as a gameplay perspective, like Dylan, I guess you didn't experience this with the Valkyries, but those are where you actually have to like, it's less about the cinematography of it and more about the actual gameplay, like utilizing all your tools, because they are difficult fights. So those are the two that really stand out: the Valkyries as a whole, and the giant corpse.
Yeah, those Valkyrie fights like swing in the opposite direction, where you're in these like super cinematic fights through most of the big bosses, and then like the Valkyries feel like difficult Dark Souls boss fights. Like they're really rewarding. You're gonna fight them over and over and over again until you just like figure out their rhythm, essentially. Like you need to understand, like, okay, this is the attack where they parry, this is the attack where I need to parry, this is the attack where I need to make sure that I'm like starting to run away, or really just using all of what Kratos has to offer. And then additionally, like, you have to build for those fights in some capacity. Like you actually have to like start really digging into the RPG mechanics and realizing like, oh, I need more health, or, oh, I'm not doing enough damage. Maybe the like R1X skill that you use that can do a variety of things, like give you more health. Like I ended up really leaning into like the slow motion for those fights, because I felt like I could like consistently get a big chunk of damage without them attacking me, because that was like always the hard part. You have to find your opening, and that just gave you a window. Those like sit in the top of my like head of some of my favorite boss fights I've ever played in a video game. I do wish that that experience was more throughout the game, and it wasn't so much just like, all right, here's these big cinematic moments, and more like, okay, here's a real challenge. But I don't think they were looking for that game.
I guess they probably wouldn't want you to just be bashing your head against the wall for 2 hours.
Yeah.
like you would in Dark Souls, where that's like the
Yeah.
experience you're looking for, and that way you'd
Exactly.
be out of the story for hours. Maybe you're starting to forget stuff. It maybe stretches the game out. So, in one way, I think it's probably good, but they could have made that stuff, some of that stuff, still optional without you having to beat the game first. Because the Valkyries, do you have to beat the game before you can access any of them, or can you access some of them from the?
I think
Because
it's
I
like
was not really
late.
like doing any backtracking in between.
You can
the
do
story
some
beats.
along the way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's later game though.
Yeah.
I think it's like maybe after you get the chisel, something like that. It's later for sure.
Okay.
Um,
Because one of the questions we had, Super Bad Mike asked, would love to hear how you guys engaged with the more difficult side content of the game. So the Valkyries, Muspelheim, Niflheim. I don't remember what the
Mhm.
difficult stuff of those play. I don't know if that's bonus stuff or if that's
it's side stuff.
story stuff.
Yeah, optional.
So
yes.
I want to hear about that then, because I have not engaged with that content of the game either. So how do you guys feel about those? I guess those are two areas that have. Tell me about that. I'm curious.
Yeah, like Muspelheim is like a challenge arena almost.
Okay.
Like you go up to these like obelisks and you start these like challenges, and it's essentially like, all right, kill all of the guys, and you move on, and it'll make you do multiple in a row. So it's just kind of like a fighting arena. And then Niflheim was, if I remember correctly, I haven't done it since launch, was kind of like a roguelike.
It's like it randomly generates each time, and so it has this mechanic where the whole area is enshrouded in fog, and the fog eats away at you. Have a little separate bar on top indicating when the fog will start affecting your health. So the whole goal is to get in, kill these enemies, collect the loot, and then get out before the fog kills you.
Yeah.
And then each time you leave, it randomly generates the enemies and the areas, the different traps that it has. So it's very roguelike, Binding of Isaac, whereas Muspelheim is just like an arcade level fighter, where you go and you get checkpoints and then you move on to the next fight, that kind of thing. Which I actually really enjoyed both of those
was fun.
areas. I think they add a lot of they make you more in tune with your combat skills, especially with the mist, because you have to know how to quickly kill these hard enemies. And they're hard enemies, like they're not easy. Just base level shit. Like you have to know exactly what the best strategy is, or else you're just going to die from the fog if you don't die from them. So it really upgrades your combat skills, which I really enjoyed. That was actually the only area, Niflheim, that I didn't 100% complete, because I was like, this is actually quite difficult.
Yeah, that's the only thing I didn't 100% in the game. I did all the side quests. I did all of the Valkyries. I beat Muspelheim. I'm probably butchering that every time I say it. But Niflheim was it was tough, and it felt like, okay, I'm actually gonna have to sit and grind in this place to get through this. And then once again, another situation where I think the Valkyries, and then both of those locations, ones that you have to spec for, you have to make sure you change your gear sets just to make sure that you are handling these situations well. There's an armor set that is specifically made for Niflheim so that the fog does not affect you as severely. It definitely wants you to dig into its features, right? And for these, it wants you to have a full understanding of all of the mechanics.
Do you feel like those kind of additional challenges are really asking you to fully understand the moveset, between those all the skill tree things? Do you feel like you truly need to utilize everything in there to be successful, or is it this Valkyrie is countered by this one specific thing in the skill tree, so you should probably have that? How does that come into it? I'm curious, because you mentioned how obviously the gear can help you, but I'm curious how the skill tree plays into it.
I don't think you need 100% understanding, but you definitely need to have an understanding of a lot of it. There's I think just getting damage out is a tricky part with those fights, making sure that you're maximizing your damage. So if you're ignoring Atreus, for example, or not doing some of the higher damage combos, they're slogs. Definitely making sure that you're looking at the effectiveness of some of the skills as well, and kind of but I think the game has enough variety in those things that in all of the RPG mechanics that you can kind of find your way through that. You don't have to I'd say if you needed 100% understanding of all of the mechanics, then like everybody would have to do the exact same thing to beat them. Whereas I do think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of like find your own way through these challenges. But I found that with like Sigrun, for example, like the last Valkyrie, like I personally only had one way of defeating this fight. Like I did that for hours and then like finally like spec'd in a particular way, and I was like, okay, this is the closest I'm gonna get. But I'm sure there's a million other like ways to go about that.
The speedrunners have probably beat it with no gear and like parries only and
fists only.
Yeah.
Well, the Valkyrie, like I think that's a great parallel that you brought up before, Dante, with the Valkyries being very Dark Souls-esque. Like it's very much they do something, there is a correct answer to it, and the hard part is just like learning that admin flow of it, which I really like, being a fan of Dark Souls. But I can see why some people would not, if they don't have the patience to put in the hours or however long it takes to learn their movesets. Whereas those optional areas, like you certainly can do them at your own pace, but Niflheim especially, because the fault, like you're on a time limit, and it's not a very big time limit, so you really have to, at least there might not be one specific way to do it, but if you're doing it your way, you have to know exactly how to do your way against these specific enemies. Which I always like the challenge that those kind of things add. I think it adds a lot more complexity to the game. So,
do you guys like the gear system overall? Like, you obviously mentioned how there's like, okay, this gear set, helps you against the fog, but I guess just since you have a better understanding of the in-depth mechanics of the game and how gear ties into like the possible damage you can do, or how do you guys feel about that?
It's okay. It's like it's a solid RPG mechanic, right? Like I think it definitely I don't know, keeps me engaged in a way that if it was just like no armor systems or like it was just what a traditional like character action game would be, it would be I guess a little less exciting. But I think the fact that it creates so much variety for Kratos is pretty fun. Like you can be somebody who like totally focuses on doing like magic damage. You can be somebody who runic damage. You can be somebody who's like totally strength focused. You can be a glass cannon. You can be super defensive. Like I like that. I do like the fact that you can kind of customize Kratos to be how you want him to be. But I feel like maybe like some of the runes and mainly the runes just get a little bit to be annoying. Like I do, it's kind of like almost like a materia system or something like that. You have these are just like slots. It's like gem slots, and they all have these like different passives on them. And it does get to a point where like, okay, min-maxing this stuff appropriately is kind of tough. Like you definitely have to have like, I think, a full understanding of what you're even putting into those slots to get the most out of them. Whereas a lot of times I'm just like, all right, this one's the highest level and it doesn't sound like shit. Or this one has like the highest perk activation. So I'm going to reach for that one because it'll like pop the most. But I'm sure if you talk to somebody who has like a better understanding of it, it's like, no, this one is excellent despite having like a low perk activation. And it's because of this. I think getting into that nitty gritty is like cool that they give you that option. But I do feel like maybe there's probably a more elegant way of doing that doesn't become such a, I don't know, like if you're playing it at like a medium level, you're just like chucking whatever the highest gear score thing is.
I pretty much would just put on whatever had the highest strength, and then I would go on my merry way.
Which is fine, because you should still be able to, adhere to that more casual play style, but while also having that, that ability to min-max it if you want. So I think it was good. It wasn't like groundbreaking anyway, but it was fine for what the game had.
Yeah, I think maybe the only thing that kind of annoyed me is just like the frequency I was getting stuff, and it would like pause the game essentially to make me look at this thing that I got, even if it sucks and like it has no color attached to it. You'd still like have to look at it.
Did you? So I'm playing a New Game Plus, so like I'm sure they may cut a lot of those things out. I didn't know you had to like look at every item you got. I'm just
you don't have to like, go into your menu, but like it's a pop-up on screen that you like are stopped, I believe. So whatever it was, I don't know. I just felt like I was getting too much stuff sometimes, but that's kind of like a more minor issue in terms of like the things I didn't like about this game. Is there anything else about the combat specifically that you guys feel like we haven't mentioned yet?
We didn't talk about your rage meter at all, or like going like I think that has a cool lore implication and like combat importance, right? Like, so you essentially go into like this rage mode and you can like rebuild, you can gain back health by hitting and killing enemies. He just like literally throws all his weapons away and he just starts punching aggressively, and it's a I always was like just spamming R1 in these moments, and then I realized like almost every button does something, which is pretty fun. Like L2, like he grabs a rock out of the ground and like throws it at you. Like
that's cool.
I think like square does like multiple stomps back to back. Like I didn't realize for the longest time, I think in this like new game plus playthrough, I was like, wait a second.
I think you have to unlock, I think you have to put those in the skill tree though, don't you?
Oh, I
might be wrong about that, but I think
that's likely. Like I said, I'm playing new game plus, so I'm just like, all right, I've got all the stuff, like I've got all the bells and whistles on Kratos right now, so I don't remember, and I have like the whole skill tree unlocked, so I don't know was given to me initially and what hasn't been. But yeah, so like I think the rage mechanic is really cool because like there are moments when like Atreus gets taken away and he's like, fuck this, and you just go into like infinite rage mode. I think there's just like some pretty great moments with that. It's really useful. It's just like an opportunity to do higher damage. I'm wearing armor right now that actually cuts it in half, but I gain it really quickly. So there's like opportunities to like adjust it as well, and once again like kind of like cater it to your play style. I don't know, it's just a fun little addition. It's something that's from the previous games as well. You would always like fill up a meter and then it's just like, all right, time to pop off. It's pretty fun. Mode.
Yeah.
Sarris, anything else from you on combat side of things?
I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty well. Yeah.
All right. With that, let's take our first ad break here, and then we'll get into the next round of topics. We are back. So I kind of want to talk about those level design issues that I mentioned, because I think to me this is why I found this game to be such a slog at times. And I think for me the biggest thing is, to some extent probably a limitation of the PS4 thing and why they designed the game this way. But I just became like hyper aware of this thing where you can never, then the game never lets you like walk for more than like, I'm going to say a minute without like having to lift up a column and move it to the side and then slowly walk through, or crawl through a gate in the wall, or open a door and close it behind you so that you have to open it again, or climb up this ladder, or the list goes on. It's like never ending, and it became this like mini game in my head I was playing of like, I wonder how long it's going to be until I have to hit X or square, whatever it is, and wait for 10 seconds for Kratos to do this thing. And it's like, dude, pick up this pillar and move it so that I don't have to do this every time. But of course, it's because that's where they're hiding their loading zones and stuff like that. So I get that limitation, but man, it drove me nuts, and it made it really hard for me to feel invested in the world because everything felt so small in this game. And I think that goes really against the story we're telling, and where like every character is like a god who has all these powers, and we're going across these different realms, but like everything is so small, and even like the distance between places, it just feels like it's just tiny. So I think to me it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of little contrived scenarios of like you have to do silly little puzzles, or to knock chains down to climb around and stuff like that. And I understand why some of it's in there, but man, it just like drove me nuts. I was pulling my hair out so much in this game because of some of those level design things.
It's so fun. Like I get it, but I also see it as like almost like really impressive game design considering like the limitations. Like that game is so pretty, and the fact that they can like, I really do think like the PS4 was like pushed to its absolute limits here, and the way that the camera works in that game, I think this is like one of my favorite parts of the entire game. The fact that there's no cuts, right? There's no hard cuts in that game at all. It's just like panning behind Kratos 100% of the time, and if they move the camera
It's
to go do
mostly like
something
that.
else,
There are
there are
some
no cuts. There's no cuts in that game.
Because I knew
When you
going into the
die.
game that was a thing that everyone talked about, so I was conscious of it. And there were many times, it's not often. Obviously, the game's like specifically set up to be this one story you're following, but it happens, man. If you pay attention to it on your New Game Plus playthrough, it happens.
I have been.
Sometimes.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm halfway through the game right now on my New Game Plus, and there is not a single time outside of when you die that they like it fades to black or there's like a flicker and you're seeing another character. The camera swings like towards wherever it's trying to go, or like it's like somebody panning like. I'm realizing there's people who listen to this, so I can't just like emote. But there's like the camera guy will like point in a direction to focus on something else that's happening. You're gonna have to show me an example of a cut because I do not believe that they exist.
I'm sure there's a YouTube video of it.
I'll have to do some digging. But that was one of the things that they like.
I'm being kind of facetious with it because it is still impressive what they're doing, but I also feel like at the cost of that is those 1 million loading zones. And for me, I actually think I would have preferred the opposite. I know this is like doing something different, but man, it really did drive me nuts to have to stop every like few seconds to wait arbitrary amounts of time. So to me, it's impressive to an extent, but it also I think actively made me dislike the game more for it.
The zones are small, but they stick you in these zones for sometimes extended periods while you handle puzzles or go and do exploring. And also, like, you're not running into that a lot when you're in, like, Greater Midgard, right? Like, you're going and you're, like, paddling your boat all around. And it's rare to be in a situation, like, where the most I think you, like, would feel those experiences when you're like, okay, I'm getting off towards an island, and I need to climb up a space real quick to get to the next zone. But these zones, I almost spend a good like 10 minutes in them before I move on. And then the whole thing that I have to do is just like pick up a rock and I can move on. And there's not this like 30-second load time, like which the PS4 is like known for having incredibly long load times for a lot of different games. I'm still like, I think, impressed at how they were good of a job they did at hiding these, because most games in that generation have like just egregious load times. And I would rather pick up a block once every 10 minutes than sit through a 30-second load screen every single time I do anything. I'm looking at you, Bloodborne. I love you. God damn. I don't know. There's just like I think once again we have to like think about that this is a game that came out at the tail end of the PS4 generation, and working within those limitations, I think it did an exceptional job of hiding those things, especially while trying to focus on the cinematography being what it is. Because they could have just cut to black in some of those situations. They could have made that area larger and then cut to black more often. But you wouldn't have had that kind of cinematic effect, I don't think. Good trade-off.
Where do you lie on this debate, Sarris?
I think I'm more with Dante on this. It's also kind of like a callback to, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this because you've played them, Dante, but those other games were very interactive like that, weren't they? Like you have to actually, press a specific button to do something. It's not just a free world open realm. So I think it's probably a bit of a callback to that. And yeah, I agree. I mean, if all I have to do, I honestly don't mind climbing up shit. I think
that's totally fair. I think if I played, as many games as you do, not to like say it that way, I probably wouldn't be bothered by it. But I've just played so many games now where I'm climbing yellow ledges that I'm just totally sick of it.
Nowhere near as egregious as Horizon is. That game, that definitely started to bother me, especially in the new one. I was like, oh my god, I can't like. So here's the deal. If
you won't find me defending the new Horizon, I did not like that game either.
If Ragnarok has as much of that as 2018 does, I think it's more of a conversation. But like,
I don't think it's a PS4 game still. It's still a PS4 game. Ragnarok.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be the exact same. I think there's only so much they can do with that hardware, right?
That's true. But I agree with you. I think the yellow ledge thing has gotten absolutely awful and really annoying, and I hate it as well. But back in 4 years ago, I don't think I was as frustrated with it as I am at this point.
And
so,
I don't think I would have been either, but of
Yeah.
course that's just the order of how my life worked out.
That's totally a fair point. I don't think I'm sucked into that yellow ledge syndrome as much as you may be.
Yeah. It's just like there's better ways, I think, to identify, hey, this is an acceptable place to climb. I do think they do a better job than like Horizon once again, though, where it's just like all these yellow laser beams all over the place, where this is just like, all right, there's these like faint gold.
Yeah.
And it
I guess
also
it's different because open world game versus whatever you want to call this. I would not call it. This is obviously not an open world game.
No,
so
it's
hard
like
to compare those two things.
I guess we're talking about level design now.
Yeah.
I think about this game like I think about like a Metroid, or like a what was the Star Wars game from
Jedi Fallen Order?
Like very similar, where it's like, okay, I'm getting these new items throughout, I'm going back, very like Metroid Prime, right?
Yeah. I think that's actually it's a pretty good comparison, I'd say. I guess because even for me, who wasn't like specifically looking at side content, you still do a lot of backtracking. In this game, you go back to places to either get things, or now you have like that chisel thing, and you can pop through this door that you couldn't before. So I think that is a pretty apt comparison. I hadn't really thought about it, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I really enjoy that. I know that some people don't like that kind of backtracking in games. I like the idea of giving me a space and then making me think about the space differently because I have new tools. I like I said, I know that one's like, depending on the person, that could be an absolute chore. But I think that also is something that I really do give like a nice little gold star to personally. Just the way that they make you rethink the space, or like when the center column moves and the water levels go down and it changes those spaces entirely. It's like, okay, I have all of these spots that I've been to before, but now I have to I'll go back to them, and navigating them is completely different. So they reuse the space despite it being a contained world, once again probably saving them from some crazy it probably would have made that game even larger than it already is. Like, I think the new game said that it's going to be like 100 gigs, so it's rough. But I think they do a really good job of reusing these spaces, despite, once again, you climb a ledge a lot. You lift up a thing, or lift up a fallen over column. It's the same fallen over column every time. Like, I'm definitely gonna give it flack where it deserves it. You know what I mean? Like, they could have done some things to make that design a little better. But once again, working with what they add, I think more. I'm trying to think of games that in that same generation that are more impressive in these situations.
Yeah, I mean, Plague Tale's the one that's hot in my mind, where it's like, it's the exact same thing of like, man, if this character could easily climb up this thing right now and the whole thing would be solved, but they just can't do it because, of course, it's a video game. But like, it just doesn't bother me in that game, and it bothers me here. So it's weird how things will just hit you differently, right? And I think that was just a thing too, where I don't know. I just felt like it felt different in this game for me, I think, because of the context of the character. And yes, I haven't played those earlier games, but obviously this guy's like a fucking superhuman. In cutscenes, he's jumping insane heights, but then I can't jump like 5 feet up, and I have to do this.
It's his boy.
Puzzle.
He's
That's
got his
annoying.
Boy.
Yeah, he's gotta make sure his boy can.
Well, how about Dante then when Atreus is sick and he's not with you? Huh? What about then?
He just knows he's gonna have to. He won't be sick soon, and he'll have to deal with it again.
No,
I don't know. No, there's no excuse.
I do feel like to an extent I am obviously like nitpicking here, but I think I pay like such close attention to level design in games, and it's like, man, I did not like, at the end of my experience, I didn't think back on any level, and I was like, man, I really enjoyed going through that sequence in particular. Like, there's a cinematic moment that stood out to me, or a character moment, some line of dialogue, maybe a certain boss fight or battle or something like that. But like, actually navigating the world just never felt good for me. And I'm not asking for a jump button, a dedicated jump button. I don't need that for what this game is. But I don't know. I guess I felt like I needed something else. And I don't want to change the game from what it is, but it was just kind of sluggish in the way you're going through things. And like, there's a lot of elevators in this game. And to talk more about some of those specific puzzles, like, this is just very much a me thing, but there was not a single puzzle in this game that I enjoyed, or like, oh man, I
like
figured that one out. So I think that is going to be more of a me thing. Once again, I liked how they used the accent in it, but like, oh man, I didn't like the way you get around this world, and that, you know, bogs down obviously like most of the experience when whatever it is, 50, 60, 70% of the game is doing that as you're going from place to place. I was just like, I think I don't know. Sony's doing a million TV shows and movies. I forget if they've announced a God of War one, but it's like, I'm excited for that because I would love this world, these story, these characters, but I don't want to play the game myself to get there. So I think that's where I lie on. I know I threw out a lot of stuff there, but I don't know, level design, puzzles, like I'm guessing you guys are just, once again, the opposite of me on that, but any thoughts on that stuff?
I can agree. I think the puzzles were, at some point, it became a bit lackluster. I mean, obviously, the mechanic of using your axe is cool. But I do remember some where I'm like, okay, I have to do this now. I don't have specifics on my mind, but I do remember that sitting in my mind. But something I did really like, and I don't even think it's necessarily done super well in this game, but just in general, I really love it, is the realm switching. Like, it just reminds me of like old Crash Bandicoot, you know, where you fucking just go to different levels, and it's just like, hey, there's something new here, even if the new areas aren't big at all and they're usually optional. But there's something really magical about that to me, so I'm always a big fan of when games do that.
Okay.
It is like it does that's a really nice way to like just change up the environment too. It's like, okay, you're not stuck by like, okay, I'm climbing up the mountain and now I'm seeing snow. By the way, the snow in this game is sick looking.
It's great.
So
Yeah.
It's so good.
But
But
when I finally got to the top of that mountain, I'm like, okay, it's
Yeah.
worth it.
yeah.
Snow.
That broken
Yeah.
elevator that took me 10 hours to finally get past. Okay, that's good. Worth it.
But yeah, just like going to Muspelheim and just being like, holy shit, this is like red. We're in this like where I am in hell essentially, or the Elven area having this like lush like this lake area with all this like lush forestry around it. Just like they do a good job of like switching it up, going between these, and it does kind of do this thing where every single time you are about to go to some place for the first time, you're like, oh my god, what is going to be different here? Like, how is this going to be a different environment? Puzzles, yeah, like I like puzzles in games. I think I'm happy that they used those to break up the combat more. I think they could have done a little more with the puzzles outside of just like throw the axe to move this lever or this like windmill thing that will end up moving its way back, or pick up the crystal and carry the crystal to the thing and then have Atreus shoot it. Like they reuse the same puzzle.
Those crystals so much.
Yeah, it makes, because it does make you like, you can't run with them, right? Like that's the only thing.
I'm like, I'm so strong.
I agree.
Run with this crystal, throw it over my shoulder.
I've hated that since like Gears of War. Don't like slow me down. You know what I mean? When we're doing something, like just like, okay, this is the thing I have to take care of. Let me throw it over my shoulder and book it. I'm Kratos. Like he can handle this.
He literally carries a tree in the opening scene.
Exactly. Exactly.
Except that
And
like
yeah,
moose
it's like,
thing, right? Too, right?
yeah, it's like the thing might as well be a pebble in comparison. So there are some moments like that where I think the puzzles I think they just need more variety in the puzzles. I think the puzzles are really fun in those moments. Like one of the early ones I think is like kind of fun is you are walking into this space and there's like spikes that can like come down and kill you, but you have to make sure that you keep the axe frozen in the same position, but then you have to pull the axe away to hit other things and then put it back to make sure it doesn't crush you. I think like stuff like that's pretty fun, but they just make you do it too many times.
Yeah, I think it's just a trap that any of the games kind of in this genre space feel the need to have puzzles like this in there to break up the combat, so you're not always doing that, to make the game, I mean, honestly, truthfully, is like part of it's probably just padding to make the game a bit longer too, and feel like, you know, you can advertise more things and stuff like that. But because of that, they also don't want to make them, it's not a puzzle game, so they don't want this to be this hard puzzle that you're stuck on for hours to figure it out, to take you out of the world, because then that would be just as bad as having too much combat or something like that. But then, you know, none of them are actually really that interesting either. So it just feels like busy work. And like they specifically wanted me to have 10 more minutes before these story beats so that a bit more time passed. And yeah, it's just too bad. Doesn't really work for me. So hopefully some of that stuff's more interesting. You have more interesting tools in Ragnarok, but I'm not expecting that to be the case. I think it'll be pretty similar tier.
Oh, I think they're going to switch it up. I do like. I'm optimistic.
I mean, there'll be some new mechanics, but I don't think the puzzles will be like better than they are here. I wouldn't expect that.
We'll see. I really like the one of the puzzle types I actually like found to be really enjoyable, and I wish they used this one more. I feel like there's a really concentrated amount of them in a space, is when you have these like tree overgrowth things and you have to find the right like space to be in to throw the axe to hit like multiple in a row. It'll be like multiple like roots, and they have like orbs in the roots, and you have to hit all of the orbs. Those were fun. I feel like those, I actually like had to like really think about the environment a few times and move into spaces, or like progress, sitting there thinking like, man, I feel like I should be able to hit this right now. But if I just like walked into the next room, I'd realize there was like a window that had visibility towards it. Like, those were cool. I wish there were more of those. They kind of seem like they're only in Alfheim.
Yeah, I guess maybe there isn't tons of that in the like kind of optional content of the game. They didn't really do more of those kinds of puzzles.
Not really. Okay. Not that I remember, at least. But yeah, once again, I think if they just, even if they bring back some of these puzzle types and just add variety to them, I don't think
I forget like what they've shown off in the trailers, and I think there's like a sword or something. So I'm sure you'll just have more tools at your disposal, right? As any sequel has to do. So hopefully with that, there's just like more variety naturally, which would make sense.
I've had blinders on.
Okay, sorry. I forget. I honestly forget what I saw.
I can handle a sword. Okay.
I can picture a couple of these cinematic moments, and I'm actually excited that you will go into those fresh, because a couple shots they've shown, I'm like, damn, that looks amazing. I cannot wait to be at that point in the game. So that's cool.
Nice.
In terms of other locations, I feel like we've mentioned the big ones, and there, like I said, there wasn't a ton that excited me too much. I think the place that I did enjoy, and I mean not for the level design or anything, but just the look of it, was the giant's corpse, like that huge giant, like the frozen giant, when you're going through that area that I cannot remember the name of.
Oh, it's like starts with a T.
Right, and I like that, like from the get-go, you can kind of see the objective, the place you're going to. It's like on his hammer, whatever it is, and you're like going around to get up there. But you know, you start pretty far from it, and then you go right up to his face, and you can throw your axe at his eye if you want, and hear the different sounds it makes when it squishes into him or bounces off his eye and stuff like that. So I liked that. I thought that was like just a fun setting for a level, at least. Any highlights for you guys in terms of locations?
I really do like that first time you go to Alfheim. It's just gorgeous. I think it's really, really pretty.
That's a dark elf like home world, right?
Yeah, I just think it's a nice change from what you've seen thus far. And then that climb at the end of the game is really something. When you get to the giant's realm and you're like climbing the mountain with the hand, or that looks like a hand, and just going in and seeing all of this like old, like just I'm trying to like word this better, but
like cave paintings or like
like just this like forgotten civilization essentially. And I thought that was really impactful, especially all of the lore dump that's happening at that point too. Definitely helps. Like, it's hard to kind of separate a lot of situations.
It's cool to have like that huge mural as well, because you're opening up those like cabinets a lot throughout the game. So to have like just something that's 20 times the size of that is pretty cool in the final moments.
I thought that was really cool. Helheim's pretty dope as well.
I remember not really like that's the afterlife, right?
Yeah, you're like, you're trying to. I'm trying to remember it 100%, but like
I'm looking at the picture here.
Yeah, it's it's like hazy and blue, and like it's just like frozen. It just seems like it's like decrepit world. I don't know.
I remember always just being like anxious, but not in a good way. There, being like, am I going to like fall off this fucking cliff into or something? I actually didn't really like that area, but something I did really like was Freya's house.
That's a good call out, man.
That's so sick. And you go underneath it, and I thought that was amazing.
That's like an oasis too. Like, you walk in there and it's like beautiful. Like I'm playing the like PS5 upgraded version, which has HDR. I guess the Pro version probably had HDR too. And like, you walk into that and it's like the most vibrant, like full, like reds and blues and like all of these just like gorgeous flowers everywhere, where you don't see that anywhere else. And then just did he name the turtle Charlie? or Charles.
Oh, I
I
forget.
forget.
It's something like that. He's like Charles said something. He's like, who is that? He's like, it's a turtle. He's like, that's what it's at least what his name sounded like.
Right.
Yeah, it's just such a good space, I'd say. Very small and contained, but like you kind of stumble in from outside where it's just like rocks and broken ships and all of this, like the typical stuff you're finding in Midgard, and then you just like it's just beautiful area.
It's a great transition area too, like actually going in there and then going back down to that cave, just the transitional space of it. I think it works really well.
Totally.
Sarah, so you had mentioned like the going to different realms. You like that part of it too. I guess we haven't really mentioned this, that the kind of fast travel in this game is contextualized as you going through the portal, which I think that's great. I like when games contextualize fast traveling. Like, shoutouts to Luigi's Mansion, where if you like look at yourself in the mirror, you like teleport back to the main foyer. I always thought that was like a really cool mechanic that you could use that at any point if you're in a bathroom, or maybe a bedroom has like a mirror in it. If you just want to quickly teleport back, like that kind of thing is cool. But this is obviously very different than that. But just having a place that you're going in the meantime between these places is cool. Once again, it's just like they're hiding loads here, so that whatever. But once you know that, you can also just like go through the door and just sit there and then wait for the thing to spawn in front of you, which is pretty much what I did every time. I just put the controller down. Whereas I think they're trying to make it so you just walk the whole time, so you're constantly in motion. But I just preferred to put the controller down and do a little stretch, something like that at those moments.
It's so funny that you like challenged it. You're like, I'm gonna stand here and wait and see if it loads, and eventually, obviously, it did. But
yeah. I mean, I'll do it. Why not? Anything else on like locations or world design? I'm thinking like the only kind of points I want to get into at this point would be some of the story moments and characters and things like that. But anything else you want to mention in this kind of section?
Nothing that we haven't already touched on. Changing Midgard's. I thought that was sick. With the water level. But yeah, other than that,
cool.
I think this is the big chunk, right? Like the story is, I think, one of the strongest parts of the whole game. So definitely excited.
Absolutely.
To talk about that.
Let's take our very last ad break, then, and we can come back and dive into that story and the characters. Okay, we are back. So actually, just to jump off kind of what you were saying there, Sarris, I really like, this is going out of order already, but that's fine. I really liked that sequence of the game where you go inside the belly, or I guess just the body of the snake. Is it a belly of the snake? Is a whole snake a belly? I don't really know.
Just a perpetual belly, I guess.
Yeah.
Or a throat, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, the throat. That sounds.
You could also go as far as say that the whole snake is the butt. So it's.
Yeah. Oh my god, I've never thought about this before. If you stretch a snake out, I guess you could look like directly. It's like a telescope.
Right through it.
Snake anatomy 101 here on GeekVerse podcast. But no, I really liked that sequence one. It was just great and cinematic. It's also kind of a terrifying moment. It's kind of scary, and there's the scale of it. And you're not in there for too long, but that was a sequence that really stood out to me, because I think like the World Serpent in general is like maybe the single like coolest thing in the game for me. When I look at the trailers for Ragnarok and they show off some like big, huge cinematic set pieces, like I think if I think about those for this game, I would just think of the first moment you see the serpent, or when you go inside of him. Like those moments really stand out to me, along with like the fight where Freya's moving the giant hand, or seeing that giant, the frozen giant, things like that. But big shout outs to the World Serpent, who is both terrifying and intriguing in a way that is very captivating, that he's kind of always there too, right? Because you're spending a lot of time in that main area. I can't remember the name of it, like that kind of center area. So
Midgard.
Yeah, Midgard, there you go.
I love how you can see him in the background too, like his body kind of,
in most like most situations, he's always there.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that he has an impact on the world, like visibly changing things, whether it's changing the water level, eating statues, things like that, just changing stuff around. Do you guys have a story moment in mind that sticks out? Do you want to talk about characters specifically? What's calling to you in this moment?
I have a moment.
Let's hear it.
Fairly early on. It's once again, I don't know why I keep bringing up Alfheim. I think it's just like present in my head because, like I said, I'm about halfway through the game. So that was something I did fairly recently. The moment you touch the light in Alfheim, I think to back up, like the relationship between Kratos and Atreus is like one of the strongest, I don't know, representations of like fatherhood in a video game. Like he's so Kratos is so detached, and like clearly Atreus is just like looking for something to hang on to with him, because it's like his last parent, because his mother died, and that's the whole reason you're doing this, is to bring her ashes to the highest point in the realm. But he earlier in the playthrough says like, I won't leave your side, or I will not leave you. And then he touches the light of Alfheim and then leaves he's there for like 10 seconds. And then you come back out and there are just piles of bodies everywhere. And Atreus had just like had to go on this like slaughter fest to survive. And he's furious afterwards. And he is just this like angsty little asshole for like a long period after that. And I just think it's like really effective. It definitely, I think, is one of the points of change in Kratos also, where he starts off as just this like brash, just not fun dad at all. He's just like bossing his son around all the time, and then he actually like, I think after that point starts treating him like a person, and not just like this thing who is just there to translate and shoot arrows. I don't know. That's one of my favorite moments in the entire game. I just think does such a good job of further setting up like their conflict, and the things that they're gonna have to deal with, because that's like it's 25% of the way through the game, right? So there's a lot of character building from that point forward. After you realize Atreus is like, you know what, fuck you, Dad. It's definitely a good part for me.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the highlight for the game for sure, is just the relationship between those characters, and especially, I mean, Atreus is the one that gets to, you know, could use this term, chew the scenery a bit more. He gets to be more emotional, and I don't know, I guess just have more like flavor to his dialogue, even where, as you mentioned, Kratos is very much just like bottling everything up inside. And I think they do a good job of that, but I think it makes him a little bit less compelling here for me. And maybe if I had played some of those previous games, it would have more meaning to it to actually have been there for his journey to get to the point where he's at now. But I think in the process of that, like, Atreus gets to shine, and I still enjoy what Kratos is doing. I think even just the, you know, like him like wrapping up his arms and stuff like that, he's constantly downplaying his abilities, who he is, what he's done, his scars, his history, all that stuff. And I think, yeah, as you mentioned, like he doesn't really fully crack open by the end of the game. It's not like he's, you know, just quipping and like you're just super lighthearted guy when it's all said and done. But he definitely opens up more, and he has that level of trust with Atreus, as, I mean, a lot of things happen with Atreus specifically, but yeah, I mean, you're definitely right to highlight that relationship. And I'm glad you brought up that moment, because I kind of forgot about that individual sequence, but you're right that is really cool from a gameplay experience too, that they kind of just skip that time and you're kind of seeing that moment truly as Kratos, right, in a way. So I think that sequence is definitely very well done.
I want to hear you guys talk about that, because it's been a long time it's been a while since I've played it, so I don't remember like the specific character implications of the story. But
well, I think sorry, go ahead.
I just really I want to relive it almost through your storytelling. So
well, Dylan, you mentioned how there's like you're not familiar with some of the implications from the previous games.
Quickly, I want to say I feel like they do a pretty good job of implying things that have occurred, even not like flashbacks, but they kind of, you know, show you some stuff. But obviously, like, I have not been there in the seat to go on that journey with him, so it's like I can't get fully there.
There's a side quest that I think is like a really great nod that Kratos definitely clearly has a difficult time dealing with it whenever Atreus brings it up, and it's about how a like a side story character stabbed his father in the back, and he's just like, how could he do that? He killed his own father. Like that's absurd. And then Kratos is just like, all right, let's go. Because he literally killed his own father as well. And I think that like that's I guess a nod to some of the side story, just like the not as much what you're doing in those side moments, but the conversations that happen throughout those side moments, I think are really kind of impressive. The fact that they are adding further depth to their relationship in those moments as well, I think is pretty cool. The fact that like I think Atreus understanding that Kratos killed his dad makes him think that maybe one day I will kill my dad. And I think maybe they even nod to it a little bit in the in the end when they're like showing Atreus with his dead father, right? I haven't seen the end of this game in 4 years.
I don't know if it's necessarily that, but I think it's just how the whole game characters are bringing up who, not even that Kratos killed his dad necessarily, but just who he is, that he is a god and that he's not sharing that with Atreus. Obviously for Freya, that's a big deal that she brings it up multiple times. Mimir is talking about that as well. And like, that's just such a huge thing to keep from someone, of course, but he's doing it because he's scared of what's going to happen, rightfully so, in a way, of course, from a certain perspective, seeing actually what does happen. But then I think that layer of like, man, is this guy going to do what I did in a way? Like, he has to kind of be fearful. But I also feel like at the same time, he almost doesn't even care if that were to occur in some way. He's been through so much that he's like, not necessarily ready to die, but I guess like by the time that would happen,
he is like a really big part of 3 is him trying to kill himself. Like, right. This man has been through it. Like, that's why he is such a traumatized character, and they did such a good job of humanizing him further in this game. Whereas like before, he was just this kind of just a badass. Like, he was just this he is that in this too, but like definitely even more so with in less character, surprisingly.
Well, I think it was a brilliant idea then to bring Atreus in as someone who you could get more playful with and have more, because he is like a kid, so he's just enjoying things. He like wants to learn, he's having fun, but is also Kratos is super hard on him. Just anytime he misses an arrow or he isn't perfect, anytime he isn't absolutely frame perfect on whatever he's doing, he's gonna get criticized for it. And I think for me, that's where the game one kind of great moment that kind of turns into just the rest of the game is when Atreus does find out that he is part god, and then I guess even later on when he finds out that he's part giant as well, like in that mural scene once again. But just the turn he instantly has where he's like, I'm better than all these people, I can kill whoever I want, I can do whatever I want, and no one is allowed to stop me. Because I think the game is to that point, it's like, okay, Kratos, maybe you've played this guy over the years, but like there isn't much personality there on the surface, and he seems like a bad guy. He's mean to his son, so you're not rooting for him necessarily, even if he is your playable character. But Atreus is like this almost happy-go-lucky kid, and you want him to succeed in life, so you're cheering for him. So to have that turn where he's like, man, that was not quick, because you are building up to that turn, but like it is still quick when he finally finds out, and then he like instantly is a different person, and he's like a piece of shit.
Yeah, ego takes
that is
over.
A really, really good moment. And then like as I said, there's like another few hours after that where you're dealing with the repercussions of that, and then he finds out even more power that he controls when both of them are learning about the mother's past as well.
Speaking of, this is a little bit of a tangent, but or just like the gods and giants in general, the way that they set up this story to be happening in the future and the past at the same time is pretty interesting. There's like a couple nods to that, and I don't think they like aggressively say that this is what's happening, but like one of the times like the world serpent comes down and like chews a statue of Thor, and he's like, oh yeah, they've had issues in the past, or I guess those are going to happen. And then understanding like, as you I did all this like side, like looking into all of the characters and kind of their like relationships at some point, and like learning that the world serpent is Atreus's son is wild.
Do you mean like God of War lore, or just like
no, in this in-game lore? Yeah, God of War 2018 lore. Like there is signs pointing to, like it is confirmed as well at this point. Like Atreus' son is the World Serpent. And there's like,
how does that work?
I don't know either. I don't
can't
understand.
drop that bombshell.
It is the case. It is the case. But like, I don't understand how this man had a snake baby. Is the thing I don't understand. There must have been some sort of transition that happens to the World Serpent at some point. But just to understand that, like,
who is the wife in that equation? That's
she's in the second game. She might be in this one. She might be in 2018. I just can't remember the end. But like, do you meet like a little girl giant?
God,
in this
I don't
game?
think so. Maybe I'm blanking on that.
Well, she's in the second game for sure. I'm like,
I can pick. I know who you're talking about from the trailers. I think. I don't think it's in this.
Yeah. So that's the mom.
Is Midgard like a separate place between? It's neither like here nor there. Like it's in the future and the past, or how does that?
That's what it seems like. They drop so many little tidbits of these, like, and I wish I had the time to make it all the way back through this game, because I would be able to like just spit. But like right now, I'm just like, oh yeah, I kind of remember this. I kind of remember that. Like he talks about the two like wolf gods. Those are the World Serpent's children, right? Like. So it's this really weird,
the
like,
that are like chasing the sun.
Hati and
that's some. I think that's gonna happen in the sequel too.
Yeah, so those are the children of the World Serpent. Like, there's this weird like familial like cycle happening, but it's like outside of time, in this like really bizarre way, that I just think is like, I don't know. It's there's so many layers to this story that they don't just throw in your face. Which I think is pretty cool. Like, I talk about Souls games every single time I come on here, but that's like one of my favorite parts about like Souls games as well. Is like, okay, there's a surface level story, somewhat. Like, it's harder to follow in that, but like it goes so deep. Like, and then there's that you can get to the point of speculation. The writing team in this game is like, I still think it might be some of my favorite writing in a video game ever. Like, just the characterization, but then also just like all of the weird deep lore that you can dig into, and how closely it follows real Norse mythology as well. Like, I think they did a really good job of tying those together without it just being like, okay, this is a video game version of Neil Gaiman books.
I mean, I got to agree with that from the perspective that like I don't really care much about the mythology, like that. It's never really been a theme or setting that's of much interest to me. So the fact that I really am into the story and the characters here, I think is a testament to specifically the writing team here, who could take this thing that I don't really care about and make me care about it. Even if I'm not hitting the wiki and like, deep diving on some of these lore dialogue things, but like even just the stuff you said there is very intriguing to me, and I want to learn some more about that. So I'm sure, I mean, the sequel will have tons of that good stuff in there, I'm sure. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think there's other good moments. I guess just the progression of Kratos opening up to Atreus obviously gets to the point where that information is shared with him, but little things too, like when he gives him the knife, or when he finally allows Atreus to take the ashes, and when it's like right near the end, so he's like, he didn't give him too much trust with it, but moments like that I do work for me too, and they feel believable. And I think it's good that they didn't go over the top with Kratos and Atreus becoming just best buds by the end of this either. Like, there is still, I think, a lot of animosity there, and Kratos is still holding back. But I think it's good when they're leaving room to do stuff in the sequel, of course. But at the same time, yeah, I think they like go deep enough with it that I feel like there's an arc happening from those two characters at least. So that's a good stuff. A couple very quick things on Kratos. One, I love the smaller chests that he just like smashes them to open instead of opening them. Like, that's a great character thing. And then one thing that actually kind of bothered me is that like in a couple cutscenes he like specifically does like his like one kind of Wolverine healing powers thing, and I'm like, you never why can't I do this? Like, this is annoying that you're showing me this. You should have just kept this not in the game at all, because now I just feel like, why do I got to find a little green potion to like actually heal?
There's like a skill that you can equip, but like, yeah, it seems like he can just do this all the time, and I want to do that all the time.
Can he? Does he just do it in regular cutscenes, or is it just like when he's in Spartan Rage? I don't remember.
It's in Spartan Rage, which I guess that's true. It's in Spartan Rage.
He does it in Spartan
Rage,
right?
Yeah. There you go.
But he's not in Spartan Rage in the cutscenes. He's just like, I just feel like healing.
That's okay. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Never mind then.
It's a nitpick. I just wanted to bring that up. I kind of think we talked through all my Atreus notes as well as we were kind of talking through both those characters. Anything you guys want to say on those two people before we move on to some of these other, I guess, side characters? But it feels bad to call them side characters. I think a lot of these characters get a lot of time to shine. They get a lot of screen time too, if you want to put it that way.
Totally.
And
yeah, everybody.
Kratos and Atreus though.
Yeah, it's an impressive duo. I don't get sick of them even remotely throughout any part of that game. Like I think they have such a good back and forth, and yeah, just knowing that kid is growing up to be like a real actor. He was at that point too, but he was in like in mid-90s, and he's in all types of shit.
Really?
Like,
that's cool.
Yeah, Sonny Soljic. He's also a professional skateboarder.
Is he the main guy in mid-90s?
Yep, that's the main kid.
Oh, that's hilarious. I did not know that.
Yeah, he's excellent. He's excellent. Yeah. I think I'm done talking about him though.
Okay, I guess we got a lot of great characters in here. I think probably my next favorite would be Freya. I just had a lot of fun going through her story. I just love the kind of the witch aesthetic. She's cagey in that she's like clearly holding back on some information. I think some of it comes across. So like she talks about her son in passing, but it never feels like they're hitting you over the head with it. That when that reveal happens, like that really worked for me. And I like that she's kind of acting as a motherly figure for Atreus, both in the way that she's like just looking out for him when he's like poisoned or messed up or helping him out. But then also the way she kind of presses down on Kratos to change his ways, because one, his actions are affecting Atreus and changing who he is, but also keeping the information from him is just going to, essentially make that situation when it finally does come out even worse, which obviously we see in this game, and it has a certain reaction with Atreus. So big shout outs to Freya. I really enjoyed her the whole way through.
I love her. She slips out of that every once in a while and like gets angry. At, like there's a moment when Atreus comes back with the green arrows.
Right.
And she flips out. She's like, where did you get these from? Never touch these again. Immediately destroys them because she understands that like that's something that could fuck with what her ultimate goal is in keeping her family alive. Just when Mimir meets her for the first time and she like spits on him. She like slips out of it every once in a while. And she's like, it's like, okay, this is not this like kind, wholesome woman in the woods. Like she's got some like dark moments for sure. And then obviously they come out more and more as the game goes on, and she ends up becoming like a prime antagonist of the game when you I don't know if we saved that for talking about Baldur or not, but
yeah, I mean, it kind of all blends together, right? Because I think that is a great moment. Well, I mean, it kind of has to be, right? Like her reaction to her son dying like has to land, and it's like it absolutely does. And I mean, even just holding off for how long they did in the game before you get that twist out. And to be fair, like I had kind of spoiled myself on some things in this game, so some things didn't come as a surprise, but that was something that still like took me by surprise, whether I had heard that at one point but then forgot about it, whatever it was. Like that moment really that really worked for me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, just like and then her relationship with Baldur is super interesting as well. Like just the fact that he definitely resents her and seemingly doesn't want her help, really. He just wants to die. He's just trying to find a way to die ultimately. I don't know. And she's just doing everything in her power to make sure that does not happen. So she almost has this kind of like conniving nature to her as well. And she's like going again, who would just like let someone, but like the fact that she is like fighting to go against what is ultimately the main goal of her son is. What mother wouldn't do that though? I don't know. Definitely an interesting dynamic there.
How about on Baldur? Any more thoughts on Baldur? Sarris, I know it's been a bit since you've played, so maybe some of these story moments aren't coming back to you as much as you would hope for, but
I'm just reliving them through what you guys are saying, honestly. Touching on the Freya Baldur thing, it is because you really see both sides, right? Like you see her preventing him from dying, but it's really just like a very selfish thing on her part. given what he his past and what he wants. So it adds the darkness to it, which I enjoyed that aspect of it. Yeah,
totally. Trying to think more about Baldur. He is such a. I said this earlier. He's such a good antagonist because of how he just constantly is like messing with Kratos, and like clearly understands quickly like Kratos' demeanor, and is just like, all right, I'm just gonna fuck with this guy constantly. Like in the beginning of the game, him just saying like, he's like, this could have gone differently. It's like, clearly it never could have gone differently, dude. Like, you were so like instigatory from the jump. Like, there's no way this could have gone better. He just like, I don't know. He's such a just a conniving, like almost like I don't know, like this just like instigatory person. Whereas like everybody else seems like they have larger reasons for doing what they're doing, but his is just like, I just want to kind of fuck with your situation. I found that pretty. I found him to be very, very entertaining.
Yeah, he's so mad like with his own situation that he just wants to, fuck everyone else's day up.
Yeah.
If he can't die, then he wants. Yeah, exactly. He wants to make others miserable.
Yeah.
I think he's a good villain, and he is intimidating and scary, all that good stuff. Even if, I mean, the obviously the story implications of that final fight with him are good. I wish I liked it more gameplay wise, because I think that would have been like, an all-time great moment. But since I was kind of just mashing buttons, I wasn't too into that element of it. But I think he is a great villain. I just love the look he has too. Just all the tattoos, always being shirtless, the kind of beard with the braids in there and all that stuff. I just
kind of hillbilly at the same time. Like,
yeah, kind of. Not very graceful for a god.
Yeah,
he definitely has this kind of like maybe half drunk demeanor to him all the time. Like he's a loose dude for sure. Really, really like him. I thought he was an incredibly entertaining character.
Yeah. We kind of touched on that first fight scene that happens right outside the house. I love too that like the implications, or I don't know, I guess the results of that, of just like knocking that like chasm into the ground essentially, like behind his house, which ends up being a level kind of area that you go through. I think that's great to have that kind of, even you haven't really spent tons of time in that area yet, I guess you've done a little bit, but I think that was cool to have just like this earth-changing reaction because of this thing that occurs there. Moving along, I mean, Mimir to me is like a great addition too. I love him so much. He I love just he's so old that he is forgetting things that are just super helpful information for all these characters to have, but he just doesn't know them until he comes up and it's like, oh yeah, like 100 years ago I probably knew about this, but like I've been stuck to this tree for so long, I don't know what's going on anymore. But he is just so much fun. I like the weirdness of having this kind of shrunken head sort of thing with you the whole time. When you get on the boat, you like, unclip him, sit him down on the seat there next to Atreus. Like, just such a fun character the whole way through, from the look to the voice acting, I think is great. And then, one compliment to the game as well. One cool thing it does is when you're traveling in the boat and there's like a character's like sharing a story, and like you get off the boat to go do some combat or something like that, and they're like, okay, we'll pick up this story later, and then you come back and that story does kind of pick up. Some other games have done that in the time since, and I think it's like that's one of the things the most I love about this game. Little details like that I think are great, and I want every game to steal that kind of thing and make it work in your own world based on what the things that would be distracting the player. But that's a great thing to have these longer stories that can have these little break points, and you can just come back to them naturally through stuff like that. So a lot of that's obviously happening through Mimir's stories and dialogue.
It makes you not want to get out of the boat sometimes. It's like, all right, this is actually like interesting.
Let's do one more lap. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it almost feels like there's a period where Kratos starts to run out of stories a little bit, especially if you're like exploring a lot. He's like, all right, like I've gotten kind of through these, or he's just like, oh, just one more. And then Mimir comes in and he's like, well, I'm gonna talk forever. Like I've got plenty of stories for you, bud. So he ends up taking the reins on that when you get him as a character. Mimir's the best. He is the best. Just this quippy, great like kind of comedic person to have alongside this like gruff man, and then ends up being this like incredibly angsty, sometimes annoying kid, but in a good way. Like it's characterized well with Atreus. It's not a bad thing, but good balance.
Well, yeah, especially we talked about how like Atreus starts out as like a kid who's having fun, but it gets kind of darker as the game goes on. So I think it's good to have Mimir in there as some lighthearted texture, because he's not like he's dropping one-liners and like making a joke with plays. Like it still is very serious tone, but he just adds like an air of fun to the environment, which goes a long way, I think.
Totally.
And that was those little interactions between Mimir and Atreus, like, and Kratos is just kind of like taking a backseat, to it, and they're just, Mimir is telling Atreus some story, and I don't know. I just really enjoyed the dynamic between all three of them interacting with each other.
Yeah, there's definitely times when like Kratos is like, stop telling this.
Yeah,
this is too much. Yeah, because it's blowing up his spot a little bit. He's like, all right, this is going to end up maybe giving this kid a little too much information.
Yeah,
I was surprised too, because I knew that Mimir was a character that you get and he attaches to your belt and all that stuff, but I was still surprised at how long into the game it happens. I don't know what percentage wise where it was, but I just remember it feeling like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot this was an element of the game. It's taken a long time where you just have the two of you. So I think it also does probably a good job of making, like, splitting up the pacing too, of okay, when it would maybe at this point we've done a lot of the Kratos Atreus stuff, you can add another layer in there that adds a little bit of variety to it as well. So I think the pacing of it, or the placement of it, I should say, is particularly good. And then maybe the two characters we haven't shouted out, and maybe there's some other ones, but maybe the highlights for me would be Brock and Sindri. Those two, I really like them as well. I guess you could say that they add some lightheartedness to the story as well in the moments you see them. But I love the dynamic between them, where obviously you kind of figure like, okay, at some point these brothers, we're gonna reunite and they're gonna have some moment, and I think that works where there is a lot of tension between them, but then they still work together to help you out. But I just love that anytime you go between the opposite one, they're just critiquing the other's work. It's like, oh, did you let him touch your axe again? Like, just making fun of their marks. And I think at one point Sindri's like, oh, he actually did a really good job here. And he like kind of concedes that he had done a good upgrade to the axe and stuff like that. But yeah, I really liked those two. I guess I thought it was a bit weird the way they paced them, because obviously that's like where you're upgrading gear, so they got to put them all over the place. It just felt a bit weird that they're teleporting all over and just always where you need them to be, even if you saw them 1 minute ago and there was other place. But I don't know, that was a minor gripe for.
Well, they even explain that they like do a little throwaway line there where Sindri like lets you know that he can kind of like go between realms whenever he wants, and that's like a thing that the dwarves can do. Sindri in general is like he got more laughs out of me than probably any other character in the game, because anytime he's just like a total germaphobe. He doesn't want to touch anything. So like every time he holds the axe, he like every time he holds the axe, he like palms it. He doesn't touch it with his fingertips. I just think it's like super, super funny. He's like reaching in his like infinite bag of everything, and he pulls out a fish, and he like freaks out when he pulls the fish out. I don't know, just silly gags, like abundant with him. Whereas like, was it Brock? Is that his brother? Brock is just like this just crass asshole and just like this rough around the edges dude. Learned that he's blue because he's just been touching too much of like magical ore, and he's not supposed to be blue at all.
I missed that line. That's a good
I was because most of the game I'm like, okay, why are they different shades? Like, why is this guy blue? And he's like, oh, because he's an idiot. And he's been touching this stuff, whereas like Sindri will not touch anything. I don't know. They have really, really good banter across the board with those two. And there's all types of optional dialogue with them. We can learn stuff about the area or about them specifically. Good shit for sure.
Yeah, I mean, giving character to what is like the person that upgrades your gear, I think is always a good thing. I'm always down when a game, really contextualize the merchants and stuff of the world that you're talking with. There's not a lot of, and there's like not NPCs in this game, right? So it makes sense that they would make those like specific characters that have stories of their own and a backstory and that kind of thing. But, also to have two of them and have this dynamic between them, I think, adds a fun layer to it where you're kind of uncovering this B plot, like the main game, hearing about what happened between these two and how they feel about each other.
Much better than like swinging a cloak open and going like, "What are you buying?"
Yeah,
right?
The same line every time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Story note. So I guess, to expand this question once again from Superbad Mike, who was asking about the difficulty earlier, he also was asking how we would compare the original God of Wars and how it relates to like Kratos' development as a character. So I think this is kind of a question that, kind of going right to Dante here, but you mentioned what was going on in God of War 3, but I'm curious about this too. Like how does this feel? Because obviously it's like a different kind of setting, a different realm, different sort of mythology they're playing with too. But do you think there's a good continuity between the games? Does it feel like you've really been on this one long journey instead of these separate experiences with the same character?
Yeah, it's one of the, I think, most impressive parts. And like I actually did a whole this was like peak streaming days, right? Like I played through all of the God of War games back to back before God of War 2018 happened. It came out and I streamed that as well. So I had like this like really I don't know, just a great opportunity to kind of see his how he's grown or how that character has changed over the years. And it is cool because in the first game, you don't know he's a god at all. So it's kind of a similar arc that Atreus runs through, where he's just like, he's a Spartan. He comes back to life through some magic, and he has a vendetta against Ares. And he's like, I'm just going to... And you just hear him scream Ares over and over and over again. And then in the second game, you hear him screaming Zeus over and over and over again. And it's just kind of like, he just has these like these bones to pick with people, and he's not necessarily characterized. That's not true. I was going to say he still is one of these characters where he is just angry, and that's kind of like his whole thing. And there's not a lot in between. But it is understandable, and there's like lots of I guess like, truly like traumatic experiences that happen to him throughout. And then by the end of it, he's just like in 3, he's just exhausted. He has had his war with the gods, and he has won essentially. And he's just at this point, like realizing he is a god himself. He realizes he's like the son of Zeus also. And that's the reason he was able to kind of like do all of these things throughout. If I'm remembering correctly, there's potential for me to butcher the hell out of this, but, so it's funny that there is like a parallel between like what he like somewhat what he dealt with, or his arc, and what like Atreus has potential to be, outside of the fact that he is trying to kill his entire family, and without really knowing it, until the end of those games. So
where does the because you mentioned a PSP game, I don't know how many other games is there outside of that trilogy?
There's 3 mainline games, and then there's God of War Ascension, which is a PS3 game that was like takes place between a PSP game and God of War 2 or something like that. And then there's 2 PSP games,
and those are kind of just like smaller.
They're like side stories. So there's like Ghost of Sparta, I think takes place before God of War 1.
I feel like I've never heard of that. Ghost of Sparta. That does not sound like a God of War game.
He is the Ghost of Sparta. He's like this like pale white demeanor. Cool, so the whole arc of God of War 1 is they kill his wife and children, right? And he's like, I want revenge because Ares set this up. He like actually, I'm pretty sure Kratos himself kills his wife and children. He like,
oh my god,
masks what he's seeing as seeing enemies, and then he like kills everybody around him, and then he comes to and he's like, all right, I just like murdered my entire village and my family. And that's why he wants to kill Ares.
That's a pretty good reason, I'd say.
Yeah. So like I said, there's good like story throughout those games, but it's nowhere near as like humanized as God of War 2018. And like I think that's why his character being like it's easily like, it's hard to tell how long in the future is, because he's a god, so you don't know like if it's been like 20 years or if it's been 100. But it's clear that there's been like he's had a life in between, and I think it's really just impressive to see that he was able to do that in the first place, because he is just this like broken man. By the end, but throughout those games, and then especially by the end of those games, it's like he has nothing to live for. but he is struggling to do the deed of hurt. Like he tries to kill himself multiple times throughout that game. I think twice. And when you get to 2018, the fact that he has created a life for himself, he's created a family, he's gotten away from all of the damage that's been caused, and it's like clear that he's trying to heal. It's cool. It's like it's a really impressive arc for a character that did not have a ton of emotion outside of anger and maybe some like just serious depression near the end of that. That he could kind of like, I don't know, come out of the other side, and then watching the challenges that come from that as he's like raising a child and trying to like restart his life back from where it was when those games originally started, right? Like he had those things at some point before. So the fact that he's like starting over, I think is like, it's just cool. It's really, I did not understand how they were going to be able to connect these games initially. And I think they did like an excellent job and improved on all of the character, or I guess he's the only character that was in both, but like really improved on Kratos. Yeah, definitely.
That's amazing.
I think worthwhile having at least a base understanding of the original games, even though it is completely unnecessary. This is one of the few series where they're like, oh, you can start here. You can definitely start here. But you get a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, even just calling it just God of War is like them saying this is a soft reboot in a way, right?
Was he with Atreus since Atreus' birth, or was Atreus like introduced to him later, like closer to the beginning of the story?
He always says you were never around, which makes me think that
I thought this was the first time Atreus popped up. Is that not correct?
Oh no, this is the first game Atreus is in. I think he's asking like, did he just like
but between these
up
games,
his mom and then just bail?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Like, was he with Atreus since Atreus has been around? Like since he was born?
So like he leaves Greece and moves to wherever this takes place in Norse mythology, right? And I think that's when he settles down and has a family. It's just, it sounds like he just wasn't a very present father throughout Atreus being alive, right? Like he like events. Yeah. So you don't know about anything that happened before, like between him leaving Greece and him having a 10-year-old son. You know what I mean? Like that all that stuff in between is still kind of a mystery. I'm curious if 2 gets into any more of like what Kratos was doing in between and why he wasn't present in Atreus' life.
Well, even just more info about what's the mother's name? She has a name.
Frigg, right? No. No, Frigg is Freya. Hold on, I'll tell you.
I that's something I would be interested in. Of course, maybe there's lore, like things you can read, extra tablets and whatnot you can find that explain some more of that stuff. But as someone who just kind of played through the surface level experience, I don't like. I would be down to hear some more of that. Maybe Atreus could talk more about that. But he almost seemed Faye, right? Pretty close to Freya. He seems like he's like ready to write her off, right? Because of some of the stuff that she was holding from him. But obviously that's kind of part of the anger that he has in the moment. So I wonder if by the time Ragnarok's coming around, maybe some time has passed, if he's going to feel differently about that kind of thing. Is there anything else on the story you guys want to, story characters that we haven't mentioned here that you want to bring up before we close out today?
There's a lot there. Like I said, there's so much. Like I would definitely suggest if you're bored at any point digging into like the God of War wiki at some point and looking at this, not necessarily like digging in and reading a whole bunch, but like looking at how these characters are connected. There's so much weird, like when you go to the like miscellaneous information and it says family members, everybody has like 30 or 40 connections. It's like pretty hilarious. They like go to like uncle-in-law and stuff like that, and it's pretty funny because they start like leaning into the fact, like I'm looking at Faye's right now, and it's talking about like uncle-in-law being like Hades and Poseidon because they're all Kratos's like family members, right?
That makes sense,
all of the people from Greek mythology. It's just pretty fun that they like connected to these. I don't know. It's pretty. They did a really, really good job of weirdly connecting all of these characters.
Sarris, anything from you on the story character side of things?
No, I think you guys wrapped it up.
One thing we didn't mention is just the I guess this will be handled a lot in 2, but just like how Atreus is Loki essentially, and how
Loki.
he is going to how I guess handling the fact that he understands that he's going to be like the god of lies in some capacity, I think is like setting himself up for whether or not he's going to be a good person. I think it's going to be pretty cool to see.
Is Ragnarok, like, how much of a time jump is it? Is it a time jump?
Atreus is still like a kid, but he seems maybe like more young teenager. So I feel like some years have gone on, but maybe
yeah.
Okay.
I'd have to, like, I don't know. Atreus seems like he's like 10 in this, and he looks like maybe he's like 13 or 14 in Ragnarok.
Okay.
But who knows?
Yeah, I guess, and to close it out here, do you guys have anything you're looking forward to in the sequel, specifically anything you want to see? I mean, I think for me, as much as I didn't really enjoy the experience of this game, I love the story. So I hope that I can connect with the gameplay more, and hopefully playing it at launch and not playing it 4 years later does not feel like, oh, I'm so behind the curve on it, but it felt like it. So hopefully it will feel like a modern game at that point, even if it is still a PS4. I mean, I don't have a PS5, so PS4 is the most modern PlayStation console I have access to. So I don't know. I hope I can connect with that gameplay more, whether it's variety stuff or it's just more interesting design of either levels or puzzles and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think I'm going into Ragnarok looking for a continuation of these characters and a story and some cool set pieces, and I feel confident that I will get to that. I just don't know if it can elevate if I once again do not enjoy actually playing the game, but we'll see about that. But how about from you guys? Anything in particular that you hope they do better in the second one? Is there any like story thing you're really hoping for? We don't have to go too deep on it, but just kind of roughly.
Well, Dante intrigued me on the whole a world serpent being fucking Atreus' son. So I don't know if that'll be a thing or not. Yeah, like the whole not here nor there. So I don't know how much of that will come up, but if it is, then I'm definitely excited for that. I think I'm almost opposite to you, Dylan. Like I'm pretty confident that the gameplay will strike me on a positive note. So I'm excited to actually like get into those nitty-gritty story details, because that's not something that I usually pay that much attention to. So yeah, I'm excited for that.
Love it.
Yeah, obviously, like all of the story situations that are coming are exciting for me, especially as we like start digging into all of the interconnectedness that they had kind of set up in the previous one. Yeah, I hope there, like, I think we talked about it in the gameplay stuff a lot. Like, I hope there is more variety from the puzzles. I hope there is maybe like an extra weapon or two, and maybe like swapping between those weapons is a little more fluid. It's pretty fluid in this one, but like it'd be really cool if you could like truly combo between them. I thought that would be really sick.
Is that something in the old games? They do stuff
like that? You could switch. I feel like maybe. I don't remember 100%, but you could definitely switch between weapons. But I think I found myself using particular weapons more than others. I would like to see them switch up the like slot system. Honestly, and the skill tree system. I think that was such a dated style of skill tree already. Like I really like when games. I don't know, this is me just like hoping now. When doing something more unlocks other things, so it kind of like starts working towards your play style a little bit. So maybe something like that. Just switching up some of the RPG mechanics a little bit. Hopefully, giving you some more challenging boss fights strung throughout instead of just these big cinematic moments as well. Like I would love to see some Valkyries pop up, which I think they may. I saw a little trailer and I saw some Valkyrie fights happening. So.
Like in the main story, you mean? Or
yeah. Just like more where you have to pattern recognition fights more than like, all right, do this big event, like throw these things at the dragon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I feel like sometimes in sequels like this, you know, they don't want to go too far, like as an evolution of the previous game's mechanics, and in the sense that like they don't want to isolate people who are just jumping into a sequel. But I feel like this game was so successful. I think it was the second best-selling PlayStation 4 game. I could be wrong on that. I think it was just right behind Spider-Man there. So I feel like from that perspective, they hopefully are going like double down on what this game in terms of the difficulty and weapon selection and some of those mechanics, and figure that, you know, a lot of people playing Ragnarok probably played this game, so you don't need to worry about those people who are jumping into this one without having played that first one, especially because that first game is so cheap now. Like I got it for like $10, and I think on the store even at like, I think before sale,
I
like
got it for
$20
$10 3 years ago.
Yeah, I know, that's
It's
crazy,
been cheap
right?
for a while.
that's a
insane.
steal.
Yeah.
Mhm. PlayStation definitely discounts their games, even like 1 year after release for Sarris there. So
Yeah.
was that on the store, or was that a physical copy?
It's from it was on the store.
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
Good stuff. Well, guys, I'm so glad that you could join me, because if it was just me and let's say someone else who also didn't enjoy the game or was just mid on it, I think it would have been kind of just a downer of an episode. And I feel like this game, I think this game deserves more, because obviously I'm an outlier in terms of not really enjoying the overall package. But I am very excited to jump into Ragnarok. I know, Dante, you'll definitely be joining me for review. Sarris, are you picking up that game at release, or are you still kind of deliberating on that?
No, probably, even if I did pick it up at release, I probably wouldn't be able to play it too much. I definitely will play it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really say when.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you do pick it up, even if you're only a few hours in, we would be happy to have you join us on the first review, impressions, whatever you want to call it, episode for that, which we will do, I guess, the week after Ragnarok drops. And then who knows, maybe we'll do a spoiler episode later on. I think that'll kind of depend on how motivated I am to talk about the game more past that first review. We will see. But once again, thank you guys for joining me. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back with more reviews and news and all that good stuff soon enough. But yeah, thank you, and see you next time. Goodbye.